The night Elena escaped one monster, she accidentally placed her hand in another man's cage. Darren had trapped her at a candlelit table, smiling like a lover, while his fingers bruised her wrist beneath the cloth. Then Adrian Moretti stood from the next table and asked one question no one had ever given her before. Are you here by choice? One whispered yes changed everything. Security moved. Darren went pale. Elena walked out alive, but when the black sedan pulled up outside Loreno, she realized rescue had a price she did not yet understand. The night Elena escaped one monster, she did not realize she was stepping toward another. Loreno looked peaceful from the street, all amber windows and quiet money. But inside, at a table near the back, Elena could barely breathe. Darren sat across from her with that handsome public smile he saved for waiters, clients, and strangers. You look beautiful tonight, he said, soft enough to sound loving. Elena heard the threat beneath it. The calls, the flowers, the way he kept appearing at her school had never been romance. They were proof that he still knew where to find her. Her fork rested untouched beside a plate she could not eat from. Around them, people laughed over wine. At their table, every second felt like a locked door. Elena kept her hands in her lap so no one would notice the tremor. Under her sleeves, the old marks had faded, but her body remembered what her mind tried to bury. Darren always hurt her in private, then apologized in ways that looked sweet from a distance. Flowers on the counter, a handwritten card, a voice cracking just enough to sound sorry. She had believed him once, then again. Then one day she stopped believing and simply learned how to stay alive. When she gave him a tiny nod, Darren's smile widened. That S, my girl, he murmured. The words were quiet, almost affectionate, and that made them worse. Elena felt them settle over her like a collar no one else could see. Beneath the table, Darren's hand closed around her wrist, not hard enough to draw attention, only hard enough to remind her who was in control. Elena stared at the candle between them, watching the flame bend each time someone walked past. You embarrassed me last week, Darren said. His voice stayed smooth. Don't do it again. A waiter approached, noticed nothing, and moved on with a polite smile. Elena wanted to stand. She pictured herself pushing back the chair, walking past the bar, reaching the front door, but her legs would not move. Darren had taught her that escape could turn into punishment if she chose the wrong second. So she sat still, trapped in a room full of witnesses who did not know they were witnesses. Then she saw the man at the next table. He was alone, dressed in a dark tailored suit, one hand resting beside a glass of water he had barely touched. He was not staring, not in the crude way men sometimes did. His attention was controlled, precise, as if he had heard enough to understand the shape of the danger. Elena looked away first, ashamed of needing help from a stranger. When she dared to glance back, his eyes were still on Darren, not on her. That mattered. He did not look at her like a wounded thing. He looked at Darren like a problem already being solved. Darren squeezed her wrist once more before rising. Stay here, he whispered. We're not finished. Then he walked toward the restroom. For several seconds, Elena did nothing. Her wrist burned where Darren's fingers had been. She looked at the front door, then down at her shaking hands. A man in the dark suit stood and approached her table. He stopped at a respectful distance. No sudden movement, no hand on her shoulder, no heroic performance for the room. Are you here by choice? He asked. Elena stared at him. Who are you? Adrian Moretti, he said. I own this restaurant. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway. Adrian followed the look and lowered his voice. I heard what he said to you. Something inside Elena cracked open at that. Not because he was kind, but because he had believed what everyone else had missed. She wanted to explain, to defend herself, to say Darren was not always like this. The way victims often feel forced to make their pain sound reasonable. Adrian did not ask for any of that. If you want to leave, he said, say yes. If you want me to walk away, say no. A simple choice. Elena had not been given many simple choices lately. Darren turned every answer into a trap, every silence into evidence, every fear into something he could use. Her mouth went dry. She looked at the red marks forming on her wrist. Yes, she whispered. Adrian nodded once. His fingers moved over his phone. Across the restaurant, two men in black suits rose from separate tables as if they had been waiting for that single word. Darren returned before Elena could stand. His expression changed the moment he saw Adrian beside her. The charm disappeared first. Then came the anger, quick and familiar. "Who the hell are you?" Darren asked. Adrian did not raise his voice, the man giving her a way out. Darren laughed, but there was no humor in it. "She S with me." Elena flinched at the ownership in his tone. Adrian stepped slightly between them. "You work at Harrington Financial on Wacker Drive. Your license plate ends in 7K2. You live in Oak Park, and you still use your mother's address when you want certain mail hidden." Darren's face went pale. The room continued around them, but at that table, the balance of power had changed. For the first time since Elena had known him, Darren looked afraid. Not sorry, not ashamed, afraid. That difference struck her harder than she expected. Darren had always seemed untouchable, a man who could impress clients in the morning and terrorize her by night without leaving enough proof behind. To the men standing behind him, his confidence cracked. "You don't know what you're getting into," Darren muttered. Adrian's reply was flat. "I know exactly what I am getting into." One of the security men guided Darren toward the exit. Darren looked back at Elena, and the look held no love at all, only rage at losing possession. When the door closed behind him, Elena finally began to shake. Adrian did not rush to comfort her. That was the first reason she trusted him. He stayed close enough to help, and far enough not to crowd her. "You don't have to go back to him tonight," he said. Elena almost laughed because the sentence sounded impossible. Darren had made himself part of every hallway, every phone call, every route home. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Adrian's face softened just slightly. "Because no one should be threatened in my restaurant and left alone with it." The answer sounded generous, but the phrase "my restaurant" lingered. This place belonged to him. The security belonged to him. Even rescue, Elena realized, was happening on ground he controlled. Adrian held out his hand, palm open. Elena looked at it for a long time. Darren's hand had always taken first and explained later. This hand waited. She knew danger did not always arrive shouting. Sometimes it arrived calm, polished, and better dressed than fear itself. But Elena was exhausted in a way that made caution feel heavy. She had spent too many nights sleeping with her phone face down, too many mornings choosing clothes that hid bruises, too many afternoons smiling at children while terror sat under her ribs. Perfect safety was not available. Immediate escape was. She placed her hand in Adrian's. His grip was steady, not possessive. Together they left Loreno and stepped into the cold Chicago night. A black sedan waited at the curb, engine running, windows dark enough to turn the city lights into streaks of gold. Adrian opened the rear door. Elena hesitated. "I can call a cab." "You can," he said. "Or Marcus can take you somewhere Darren cannot follow." The driver glanced back through the mirror, his face calm, his eye kind. Elena climbed in. Adrian sat beside her, but left enough space for her to breathe. That space mattered. It made the car feel less like captivity and more like shelter. Still, as Loreno disappeared behind them, Elena realized she had not chosen a destination. She had chosen a man she did not know, because the man she did know had become unbearable. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The Jefferson," Adrian said. "A private apartment, secure building. You can sleep there tonight." Elena turned toward him. "I can afford that." He looked at her as if he had expected the protest. "This is not a bill." "Everything is a bill." The words came out sharper than she meant them to. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Not this. She wanted to believe him. She also knew every kindness she had accepted from Darren had eventually become proof that she owed him obedience. Outside the window, Chicago moved past in blue and silver. Elena pressed her wounded wrist against her stomach and tried to decide whether relief could be trusted. When she asked how he had found Darren's information so quickly, Adrian did not pretend innocence. He showed her a message from someone named Marco. Address, employer, vehicle, prior complaints. The list was short, clean, and terrifying. Elena felt the first chill of doubt. Adrian had protected her, yes. He had also shown her how easily he could open a person's life and read the contents. "Do you do this often?" she asked. "Necessary." "Who decides what's necessary?" Adrian met her eyes in the window reflection. "Tonight you did." It was a perfect answer, almost too perfect. Elena wanted comfort badly enough that she accepted it, even while some quiet part of her stored the warning away. The Jefferson rose above the street in glass and stone. Inside, the lobby was silent, polished, and watched by men who greeted Adrian by name. Elena followed him into the elevator and saw their reflection in the mirrored wall. Adrian looked untouched by the night, his suit dark and exact, his face controlled. She looked pale, small, and shaken, as if the restaurant had spat her out unfinished. Adrian noticed her, staring, and turned away, giving her privacy without making a show of it. The elevator opened into a penthouse filled with quiet light. The windows showed the city glowing far below. Fresh towels waited in the bathroom. The kitchen was stocked. The bed was made. It was beautiful enough to frighten her. "This is too much," Elena said. Adrian set a key card on the counter. "One night," he replied. "Longer only if you choose." She heard the word choose and did not know what to do with it. "I have work tomorrow. Second grade. Room 214. Lincoln Elementary." Her body went still. "How do you know that?" Darren appeared there twice this month. Marco checked the places he had been. It was meant to comfort her, and part of it did. Another part recoiled. Adrian's protection came with eyes records people reach. He seemed to read the fear before she said anything. "You can leave whenever you want," he added. Elena wanted to ask if powerful men understood the difference between permission and freedom. Before leaving, Adrian told her something that changed the room. His father, he said, had been violent. His mother survived by learning which sounds in the house meant danger. He did not tell the story dramatically. He spoke like a man naming weather from long ago. "I was too young to stop him," Adrian said. "Old enough to remember." Elena stood by the kitchen counter, arms folded around herself. "So now you stop men like Darren." Adrian's expression hardened. "When I can." It should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it sounded like an old wound made into a rule. Elena felt sympathy stir, unwanted and immediate. She had escaped one man's pain. Now she was beginning to care about another man's. That first night, Elena slept without a nightmare. Morning came pale and quiet through the windows. For a few minutes she did not remember where she was, and the absence of fear felt strange enough to hurt. Then her phone lit up. 7 missed calls from Darren. 12 messages. The first begged, the second accused. By the 6th, he called her ungrateful. By the last, he promised she would regret humiliating him. Elena deleted them one by one with shaking fingers. It felt like courage. It was courage, but not only that. It was easier to erase Darren while standing in Adrian's penthouse, behind Adrian's doorman, with Adrian's driver waiting downstairs. Freedom, she realized, felt stronger when guarded. A woman named Sarah arrived later with clothing, toiletries, and a bag of pastries still warm from the bakery. She smiled as if Elena were a guest, not a problem to be managed. "Mr. Moretti asked me to bring what you might need." Elena unfolded a navy dress and found it was her size. The shoes fit too. Even the cardigan looked like something she might have bought for herself if she had money to spare. Instinct should have been alarm. Instead, after months of being ignored, blamed, and grabbed too hard, being anticipated felt almost tender. On the counter lay a note in Adrian's handwriting. "Everything else has been handled for today. Rest." Elena read it twice and hated how much she wanted those words to be true. At school, Marcus waited outside while Elena walked into her classroom carrying a lunch she had not packed. The room smelled of crayons, glue, and lemon cleaner. For 6 hours, the children pulled her back into ordinary life. One boy lost a tooth during math. A girl cried because her paper crown tore. Someone asked if clouds got lonely. Elena laughed before she remembered that laughter still belonged to her. At lunch, her phone buzzed. "Are you safe?" Adrian had written. She stared at the message. Safe was no longer a simple word. She typed, "I think so." His reply came after a pause. "Thinking is not enough. Marcus will stay until you leave." Elena should have felt watched. Instead, she felt her shoulders drop in relief. After school, Elena asked Marcus to take her to her old apartment. "I need clothes, documents, my mother's bracelet. My life is there." Marcus hesitated. "I have to call Mr. Moretti." The sentence landed badly. Elena turned slowly. "You have to call him before I go to my own home." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "It's for your safety." She faced the window so he would not see the anger in her eyes. Her life had become a place other people discussed, before letting her enter it. Adrian approved the trip, but he sent 2 extra men. They followed her up the stairs in silence, while she unlocked the door to the small apartment she had once believed was hers. Inside, everything looked the same and completely changed. The mug in the sink, the blanket folded over the chair, the stack of lesson plans on the table. Elena packed quickly, moving from room to room as if Darren might appear from the walls. Sweaters, papers, a framed photo of her parents on a summer afternoon before the accident took them both. She held it too long. That was when Darren's voice came from the hallway. Elena, her body froze. Marcus moved first, stepping between her and the door. Darren stood outside, hair wet from rain, face arranged into wounded concern. "Baby, please," he said. "I was worried sick." Elena clutched the photo frame. "You need to leave." Darren's eyes softened instantly, the way they always did when anger failed. "I messed up," he said. "I know I scared you, but you know me. You know I love you." Once, that voice could have pulled her back. Too tight, it sounded like a performance she had finally seen from backstage. "You threatened me," Elena said. "You hurt me." Darren's mouth tightened. "Now you letting strangers ruin my life over one bad night." Marcus blocked him when he tried to step inside. "I am her boyfriend," Darren snapped. Elena stepped forward, heart pounding so hard she felt sick. "No," she said. It was only one word, but it belonged to her. Then another voice spoke from the stairs. "She answered you." Adrian Moretti stood at the top of the staircase, rain darkening the shoulders of his coat. He did not look angry, and that made him more frightening than if he had shouted. "You have 3 prior complaints," Adrian said to Darren. 3 women, 3 settlements, 3 stories buried before they could become inconvenient. Darren's face drained of color. "That S private, not anymore." Elena watched as the man who had ruled her fear suddenly looked cornered inside her narrow hallway. Adrian stepped closer. "Contact her again, and every file you thought was sealed will find daylight." Darren forced a laugh. "That S blackmail." Adrian's voice stayed cold. "Blackmail asks for payment. This is a boundary." Darren left with hate in his eyes and fear in every stiff movement of his body. Elena did not feel victorious. The moment the door closed, she sat on the edge of the bed and shook so badly the photo frame rattled against her knees. Adrian stayed several feet away. "You told him no," he said. Elena tried to breathe. "Only because you were here." "No," Adrian replied. "I was here because you had already decided." It was exactly what she needed to hear. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he knew that giving her courage back in her own name would bind her closer than any claim ever could. Elena only knew that for the first time she imagined herself surviving. In that image, Adrian was always nearby. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian did not flood her life with grand gestures. That was what made him difficult to resist. He appeared in practical ways. Coffee delivered before school. A quiet message after difficult mornings. A driver who never asked questions. A dinner left at her door when she forgot to eat. Nothing looked possessive on its own. Together, the details formed a net so soft she did not notice it settling around her. Elena told herself she was accepting help, only until she could stand alone. Yet on mornings when Marcus was late, panic rose fast. On evenings when Adrian did not text, she checked her phone more than once. Dependence did not feel like chains. It felt like finally being able to sleep. One rainy evening, Adrian arrived with dinner from 4 different restaurants. Elena opened the door and stared at the bags. "Are you feeding a family?" she asked. "You have had very few choices lately," he said. "I thought you deserved too many." She laughed before she could stop herself. They ate at the kitchen island while rain tapped the windows. Elena told him about her students, about the girl who spelled butterfly with 3 Y's, and the boy who believed worms had feelings. Adrian listened as if every ordinary detail deserved respect. Darren had called her stories boring. Adrian asked questions. That difference worked on her more deeply than flowers ever could. For the first time in months, she talked until her voice felt like her own again. Later, the conversation turned toward the years after her parents died. Elena had been 23, old enough to sign papers and too young to understand how silence could swallow a house. Darren had entered her life during that silence, patient at first, careful, almost kind. He found the empty places, she said. Adrian's jaw tightened and made himself necessary. Elena looked at him across the dim kitchen. Is that what you redoing? The question surprised them both. Adrian did not look away. I may be many things, sang Elena. I will not lie and call myself harmless. It was not reassurance. It was warning. Elena should have stepped back from it. Instead, she felt the pull of wanting to know the man behind the danger. Adrian left early that night. He packed the leftovers, checked the lock, and said, "You owe me nothing." After the door closed, the apartment felt colder. Elena stood in the kitchen, listening to the silence he had left behind. That frightened her more than Darren's messages. She had known Adrian for weeks, not years. He was surrounded by secrets, security, and men who answered him before he finished speaking. Still, the room felt safer when he was in it. Elena told herself this was normal after fear. People cling to whoever helps them survive. Knowing that should have made her careful. Instead, she walked to the door, opened it once, and looked down the hall, hoping he had not gone far. When Adrian suggested she move into a smaller apartment, Elena felt both relief and loss. "Not here?" she asked before she could hide the disappointment. He noticed. He always noticed. "You need your own space," he said. "A life that does not feel borrowed." The apartment he found was modest compared to the penthouse, but secure, bright, and far better than anything Elena expected. "I can only accept if I pay rent," she said. Adrian nodded. "You will pay rent." She did not ask whether the amount was real or symbolic. She needed the dignity of payment. Only later did she learn the building belonged to one of Adrian's companies. By then, she had already begun to sleep there. The new apartment had strong locks, wide windows, and a doorman who looked up at exactly the right moments. Sarah helped unpack books. Marcus carried boxes without complaint. Adrian stood near the window, studying the street below. "What are you looking for?" Elena asked. "Blind spots. I thought this place was safe." "Not a place," he said. "It is a system." Elena wanted to argue, but part of her liked the certainty in his voice. She had lived too long with unpredictable fear. Adrian's world had plans, exits, guards, and answers. That night, after everyone left, she sat alone in the quiet apartment and realized the silence did not feel empty. It felt watched over. She was not sure whether that comforted or frightened her. Spring came slowly to Chicago. Elena began therapy with a woman Adrian recommended, though she insisted on paying for each session herself. That small act mattered. It was one piece of recovery that did not come from Adrian's wallet, Adrian's staff, or Adrian's phone calls. In therapy, Elena learned that the body keeps listening for danger, long after the danger leaves. She learned why a slowing car could make her hands shake, why kindness could make her suspicious, why a part of her still missed the Darren who had never really existed. Some days she felt brave. Other days she checked the locks 6 times. Adrian never mocked the fear. His patience became a room she kept returning to. Adrian visited often, but never stayed unless Elena asked. That restraint became its own kind of seduction. He brought books instead of jewelry. He remembered that she hated mushrooms and liked cinnamon in her coffee. He spoke about changing his family business, moving money into restaurants, shipping, real estate, anything that could stand in daylight. "Do you want to be good?" Elena asked once. Adrian looked at her for a long time. "I want to be less dangerous to the people I love." The answer should have scared her more than it did. Instead, it made him sound like a man fighting himself. Elena had spent years trying to be loved properly. Now she began to wonder whether love could help make someone better. Their almost romance stretched across weeks. A hand brushed hers during a walk through Grant Park. A silence lasted too long in her doorway. Adrian watched her like a man waiting for permission he refused to take. Finally, Elena said what both of them had been avoiding. "There is something happening here." Adrian's expression softened, but he did not move closer. "Yes, and you are going to pretend there isn't tea. I am going to remember that you are healing." The answer disarmed her. Darren had never slowed down for her fear. He had used it. Restraint felt like respect. Maybe it was. Maybe it was also the one thing that made her step toward him willingly. "I might be ready," Elena said. Her voice trembled, not because she feared him, but because wanting anything after Darren felt like stepping onto thin ice. Adrian did not smile like a man who had won. He looked almost hurt by the trust she offered. Then we move at your pace. Their first days together were ordinary in a way Elena found precious. They walked in the park. They burned pasta. He held her hand and let go first. One night, he felt that she flinced him on the couch and how her elbows turned her to a blanket instead of carrying her to bed. Elena noticed every boundary he respected. Each one made him safer in her mind. Each one drew him closer. For 3 months, Darren stayed silent. Elena began to breathe differently. Her students noticed she smiled more. She wore brighter colors. She stopped flinching every time the classroom door opened. Sometimes she even forgot to be afraid. And then the forgetting itself startled her. On a late Friday in May, Adrian called while she was grading spelling tests. His voice was hard, stripped of warmth. Elena, listen carefully. Marcus is coming inside. You leave with him immediately. Her pen slipped from her hand. What happened? Darren was arrested this morning. He attacked another woman. The room tilted. Adrian continued, steady and controlled. Police searched his home. They found photos of you, schedules, notes. He never stopped watching. Elena did not remember standing. She remembered Marcus at the classroom door, and the principal's worried face behind him. The children were at art class. Thank God for that. In the car, she pressed her hands between her knees to stop them shaking. Darren had not vanished. He had only gone quiet, circling her life like smoke under a door. Where are we going? She asked. Marcus kept his eyes on the road. Mr. Moretti's estate. No, my apartment not tonight. The refusal landed like a lock turning. Pride rose, then fear crushed it flat. By the time they reached the gates outside the city, Elisina had surrendered the independence she had spent months rebuilding. Adrian met her in the foyer. The house behind him was enormous, dark wood and stone and silent security. Elena walked into his arms before she could think better of it. He held her carefully, one hand at the back of her head, the other between her shoulders. He cannot reach you here, he said. The words were exactly what she needed, and that was why they mattered so much. That night, she sat by a window overlooking the grounds, while guards moved near the trees. Adrian brought tea she did not drink. He is exposed now, he said. You won. Elena looked toward the gates. Why does it feel like winning? Adrian sat beside her. Because your body has not learned the war is over. For the next several days, Elena lived inside Adrian's protection. No school, no apartment, no walks without someone nearby. Everyone called it temporary, but temporary could still feel like a cage, when every door opened only after someone else approved it. The strange part was that Elena did not hate it as much as she wanted to. Fear was loud and Adrian's house was quiet. Meals appeared. Curtains closed at dusk. Guards checked the grounds. I hate that I feel safer here, she admitted one evening. Adrian looked at her with a sadness that might have been real. Safety after terror is complicated. Elena almost said, so are you, but she was afraid he would agree. Police later confirmed the full extent of Darren's obsession. Photos of Elena entering school, photos of her apartment building, a calendar marked with the times she left work, a notebook full of sentences that sounded like ownership rotting into rage. When Elena heard more about the woman he had attacked, guilt struck so hard she had to sit down. If I had reported him sooner, maybe Adrian cut in gently. No. You don't know that. I know blame is easier than helplessness, he said, but his violence is not your debt. The words were true. Still, truth did not settle easily. Guilt stayed where fear had lived, another ache looking for a home. That night, Elena could not sleep. She found Adrian in the library, reading beneath a single lamp. He looked up as if he had been waiting, without wanting to admit it. Nightmare. No, she said. Worse. Thinking. He closed the book. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a while, neither spoke. Then Adrian told her about his younger sister, Isabella, and her upcoming wedding. His voice changed when he said her name, softer, less guarded. She believes I am better than I am, he said. Elena watched his face. Maybe she sees the part you keep hidden. Adrian smiled faintly. Maybe I protect her from the rest. When Adrian spoke of Isabella, Elena saw a different kind of loyalty in him. Not gentleness exactly, but devotion. He kept his sister far from the men who lowered their voices when he entered a room. He kept danger outside her door, the way other brothers might keep out rain. Elena should have noticed how naturally he divided people into the protected and the disposable. Instead, she held on to the proof that he could love without destroying. Would she hate me? Elena asked. Adrian looked surprised. Why would she? Because I come with trouble. His expression darkened. You are not trouble. The firmness in his voice wrapped around her like a coat. Elena believed him because she was tired of seeing herself as damage. A week later, after a long meeting with police, Elena broke down in the car, not loudly, unable to hold her face still. Adrian did not tell her to be strong. He did not touch her until she reached for him first. Then she cried against his coat, while Marcus drove through the city in silence. I hate him, she whispered, and sometimes I miss who I thought he was. Adrian's hand moved slowly over her hair. You miss the lie that helped you survive. Elena closed her eyes, not make her feel foolish. When they reached her apartment, she asked Adrian to stay. He slept on the couch. She slept because he was there. In the morning, Elena found him making coffee in her small kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled up, expensive watch resting beside the sink. The scene was so ordinary it hurt. He remembered cinnamon. He remembered no sugar. He remembered the chipped blue mug that had belonged to her mother. You notice everything, she said. Adrian looked down at the mug in his hands. I learned young that details keep people alive. It was not flirtation. It was biography. Elena understood then that his tenderness and his control came from the same place. He noticed because he cared. He noticed because he ruled. She did not know how to separate those truths, so for a while she stopped trying. Life resumed, but it did not return to what it had been. Darren waited in jail. Lawyers called. Police asked questions that pulled old memories up like bruises rising under skin. Elena returned to school and found comfort in small chaos, spelling lists, lost crayons, arguments over who got to feed the class fish. Adrian became part of that rhythm too. He came to school events with quiet charm, shaking hands with colleagues who had heard rumors and did not know what to believe. At the winter fundraiser, he wore a Santa beard and listened solemnly to children requesting impossible gifts. Elena laughed until her eyes filled. For one bright hour, she forgot how many grown men were afraid of him. That was the hardest thing to explain, even to herself. Adrian could be tender. He could sit through a children's play with full seriousness while second graders sang wildly off-key. He could remember Sarah's birthday and send medicine when Marcus had the flu. Then his phone would buzz, his face would change, and he would step outside to speak in a voice Elena never heard him use with her. When he returned, he would be gentle again. The two versions of him lived side by side. Elena learned not to ask every question that came to mind, not because he forbade it, but because she feared some answers might take away the peace she had begun to need. One evening by the river, Elena asked if Adrian had ever been in love. The city lights trembled on the black water beside them. He took so long to answer that she thought he might not. No, he said finally, not in any way that made me less selfish. Elena stopped walking, and now, Adrian turned her. His face held no performance. Now I think about what my choices will do to someone else before I make them. The confession entered her quietly. He was not promising to be harmless. He was saying she had changed the calculation. For a woman once treated like a possession, becoming someone's reason felt powerful. It also placed a weight in her hands. Their first kiss happened after an ordinary dinner in her apartment. That made it feel real. Elena burned the garlic bread. Adrian ate it anyway. They stood near the door, reluctant to end the night. I don't want gratitude from you, he said. Elena's heart beat hard. That is what this is. Are you sure? He asked. It was the right question, maybe too right. Elena searched herself and found fear, comfort, desire, confusion, all tangled beyond sorting. No, she admitted, but I know I want to try. Adrian lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to refuse. She did not. His kiss was gentle enough to feel like permission, and intense enough to feel like surrender. After that, Adrian became both lover and shelter. He never pushed her faster than she could bear. When nightmares came, he woke before she fully cried out. When court dates approached, he cleared his schedule. When she wanted space, he gave it. Though Elena always sensed, he remained close enough to return in seconds. Her therapist once asked, "Do you feel safe when you are alone?" Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. the honest answer was not yet. Alone still felt like exposure. Safe meant Adrian's hand at her back, marked downstairs, a phone that would be answered on the first ring. She was healing, but her healing had attached itself to him. Darren's trial began in early autumn. Elena testified on a Tuesday morning, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Darren sat across the room in a suit, too much like the ones he wore when charming clients and neighbors. He did not look remorseful. He looked at her like she had stolen something from him. Elena's voice shook at first, then steadied. She spoke of the threats, the bruises, the night at Loreno, the photos police had found in his home. Adrian sat behind her, silent and unmoving. Elena told herself she was speaking for herself. She was. But when she stepped down, the first face she searched for was his. Outside the courtroom, Elena met another woman Darren had hurt. Her name was Marissa. She was older, with a scar near her lip and eyes that seemed permanently tired. They stood beside a vending machine, both pretending they did not need the wall for balance. "I thought I was the only stupid one," Marissa whispered. Elena felt the words like a blade. "You weren't stupid." Marissa gave a small humorless laugh. "I know that in my head." Elena nodded. "Me too." For a moment there was no Adrian, no security, no strategy. Just two women holding the same brutal truth between them. Surviving someone does not always free you from the version of yourself who stayed. Darren was sentenced to 12 years. Elena expected relief to rush through her like sunlight. Instead, she felt tired. Adrian drove her home, but she asked to stop at the park first. They sat beneath bare branches while a child chased pigeons across the path. "It's over," Adrian said. Elena watched the birds scatter. "And why do I still feel like I am waiting for him to call?" Adrian did not offer an easy answer. "Because fear keeps ringing after the phone is gone." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his coat around her shoulders. The warmth was real, so was the question underneath it. Who would she be if no one's shadow covered her at all? Months later, Adrian proposed at Loreno, in the same room where Elena had once sat frozen across from Darren. He had reserved the restaurant before opening, leaving only candles, quiet music, and the table that had changed her life. "I hated this place for a long time," she admitted. Adrian stood beside her, not across from her. "Then let me give it back to you differently." He spoke of love, but not only love. He said she had reminded him that goodness was not weakness. He said she made him want to become a man who could stand in daylight. Elena listened with tears in her eyes, feeling cherished, afraid, and strangely responsible for the better version of him. When Adrian knelt, Elena saw the ring, but she also saw everything behind it. Darren's hand on her wrist, Adrian asking if she was there by choice. The penthouse windows, Marcus outside the school, courtrooms, nightmares, coffee with cinnamon, hands held in silence. "Do not say yes because I saved you," Adrian said. "Say yes only if this is what you choose." It was exactly what he needed to say, and exactly what she needed to hear. Elena searched herself for obligation and found some. Because how could she not? But she found love too. Gratitude, fear, desire, safety, hope, all of it tangled beyond separating. She looked at him and said yes. The engagement made Adrian's world part of Elena's everyday life. She met Isabella, who hugged her as if they had been family for years. She met men who kissed Adrian's cheek and lowered their voices when business came near. She learned which rooms in his family home felt warm, and which ones no one entered without invitation. Adrian never embarrassed her with displays of power. But power followed him like weather. Doors opened, conversations stopped, problems disappeared before she learned their names. Elena told herself she was not impressed. Sometimes she was. Sometimes she hated that she was. After helplessness, being loved by someone untouchable could feel intoxicating. The night before the wedding, Elena stood awake in a guest room at Adrian's estate. Her dress hung from the wardrobe like a quiet ghost. Sarah had left tea on the bedside table. Isabella had tucked a note under the door, welcoming her to the family. Elena should have felt only joy. Instead, she looked down at the guarded driveway and thought of her old apartment, the chipped blue mug, the classroom fish, the woman she had been before everyone began protecting her. Then Adrian knocked once. "May I come in?" he asked through the door. That question undid her. Darren had never asked. Adrian always did. Elena wiped her eyes and opened the door. Adrian did not cross the threshold until she stepped back. He looked tired, almost nervous, and that made him seem younger. "Cold feet?" he asked. Elena gave a faint smile. "Honest feet." He nodded. "Then be honest." She looked at him for a long moment. "I am afraid I learned to love you because I needed you." Pain crossed his face, but he did not turn away. "Maybe need open the door," he said. "That does not make love false. And what if I am still not free?" Adrian was silent long enough for the question to matter. "Then I spend my life making sure you can become free," he said. "Even from me." It was a beautiful promise. She needed it to be true. In a garden washed with bright afternoon light. Anyone watching, it looked like a fairy tale. White flowers, polished chairs, a string quartet, Adrian Moretti waiting at the altar with devotion plain on his face. Elena walked slowly, her father's photo tucked inside her bouquet, her mother's bracelet at her wrist. Halfway down the aisle, memory rose without warning. Loreno, Darren's hand, the command to stay. Her steps faltered. Adrian saw it. He did not move toward her. He only held her gaze, steady and patient, letting her finish the walk herself. That mattered. Elena took one step, then another. This time, no one carried her. Their vows were simple. Elena promised honesty, courage, and the daily work of choosing instead of hiding. Adrian promised patience, protection, and truth, even when truth made him harder to love. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand trembled slightly. Only Elena noticed. "You gave me a reason to be better," he whispered when the officiant stepped back. The words moved her deeply, but somewhere in the back of her mind, a warning stirred. Being someone else's reason is not the same as being their equal. Still, she kissed him when the ceremony ended. The guests applauded. Isabella cried. Marcus smiled. For a few shining minutes, everything looked like healing. At the reception, Elena danced with Adrian beneath strings of warm lights. His hand rested at her waist, steady and familiar. "Are you happy?" he asked. She looked around at the flowers, the laughing guests, and the nearly invisible security at the garden's edges. "Yes," she said. It was not a lie. Happiness can stand beside fear. Love can stand beside questions. Darren had been chaos, cruelty, and hunger. Adrian was order, restraint, devotion, and power. One man made her small by breaking her. The other made her safe by surrounding her. Elena did not yet know whether being surrounded could become another kind of smallness. She only knew that tonight she could breathe. Years later, people would tell the story simply. Elena escaped a monster and married the man who saved her. It sounded clean that way, almost romantic, but the truth was never clean. Adrian did save her from Darren. He also became the center of the world she rebuilt after him. His protection gave her room to heal, but it also shaped the walls around that room. Elena was not foolish. She knew the difference between Darren's cruelty and Adrian's control. One wanted to own her pain, the other wanted to guard it. But ownership and guardianship can look dangerously similar when both are held by powerful hands. That question stayed beneath the wedding music, long after the last song ended. What makes Elena's story unsettling is not that she loved Adrian. It is that her love grew in soil watered by fear, rescue, gratitude, and need. After trauma, the heart does not always move in straight lines. It reaches for the person who stops the bleeding, even if that person carries danger of his own. Elena found tenderness in Adrian. She found patience, attention, and fierce loyalty. She also found a life where safety depended on his reach, his name, his men, his rules. The cage was no longer ugly. It had warmth, flowers, and open windows. That did not make the question disappear. Did the door truly open, or had it simply become more beautiful? Elena called her marriage a victory. Part of it was, she had stood in court. She had said no. She had survived the man who tried to shrink her into silence. No one could take that from her. But survival is not always the same as freedom. Sometimes survival is a bridge, and people cross it by holding the hand available to them, not the hand that would be safest in another life. Adrian Moretti was not Darren. He did not need to shout, threaten, or bruise to be powerful. His danger was quieter, wrapped in patience and devotion. He loved Elena intensely, protectively, and with the instinct to build walls around anything he could not bear to lose. So the question is not whether rescue can be real. Adrian's rescue was real. Elena's healing was real too. The question is what happens after the rescue, when the person who saved you still holds the keys, the guards, the money, and the map. Healing should eventually return power to the person who was hurt. Otherwise, shelter can become a softer form of captivity. Elena escaped Darren's darkness, but in Adrian's arms she found a sanctuary with shadows of its own. Maybe she would grow strong enough to open every door herself. Maybe Adrian would keep his promise and let her. Maybe the softest cage is the one a person enters willingly, grateful for the quiet, unable to measure the walls. Every mafia boss story is not only about power, money, revenge, or fear. Beneath the violence and darkness, there is often a painful human lesson about choices, consequences, loyalty, family, and the price of ambition. This story reminds us that no matter how powerful a person becomes, no one can escape the truth forever. Hundreds of people, and make others tremble at the sound of his name. But if his heart is empty, his victory is never complete. The mafia boss in this story represents a man who built his life on control. He believed that fear was stronger than love, that silence was safer than honesty, and that power could protect him from pain. For years, he may have won every battle in the streets, in business, and among his enemies. But the most important battle was never outside him. It was inside his own heart. That is where he truly lost himself. One of the most meaningful lessons from this story is that power without morality becomes a prison. Many people dream of becoming rich, respected, or feared. They think success means having control over others. But real success is not measured by how many people obey you. It is measured by how many lives you protect, how much peace you create, and how much good remains after you are gone. The mafia boss had money, influence, and protection, but he did not have peace. His life shows us that a person can be surrounded by luxury and still feel completely alone. Another important lesson is that loyalty is valuable, but blind loyalty can destroy lives. In the world of crime, loyalty is often treated like the highest law. People are expected to follow orders without question. Never mean giving up your conscience. A loyal person does not simply protect someone's secrets. A loyal person also has the courage to stop someone from destroying themselves. This story teaches us that loyalty without honesty is dangerous. Real loyalty should be connected to truth, respect, and moral responsibility. The story also shows the heavy cost of revenge. Revenge often feels powerful in the beginning. It gives a person the illusion that pain can be answered with pain, but revenge rarely heals anything. Instead, it creates a chain of suffering that keeps growing. One act of revenge leads to another. One betrayal leads to another. In the end, everyone loses something. The mafia boss may have believed that revenge would restore his honor, but what it truly did was steal his humanity piece by piece. This is a powerful reminder that forgiveness is not weakness. Sometimes, forgiveness is the strongest decision a person can make because it breaks the cycle of hatred. Family is another central lesson in this kind of story. Many mafia bosses claim they do everything for family. They say they commit crimes to protect the people they love. But protection without honesty can become another form of harm. A family does not only need money or security. A family needs trust, emotional safety, and love that is not poisoned by fear. If a father, husband, brother, or son becomes powerful but loses the ability to show tenderness, then his family may live in a beautiful house, but still feel trapped inside it. This story reminds us that children and loved ones often pay the price for the choices of powerful men. The mafia boss may think his decisions only affect his enemies, but every secret, every violent act, and every betrayal leaves a shadow over the innocent people around him. That is why one of the strongest educational messages is this: before making a decision, we must ask ourselves who will suffer because of it. A selfish choice may bring temporary success, but it can create long-term pain for the people we love most. Another meaningful point is the danger of pride. Pride can make a person refuse to apologize, refuse to change, and refuse to admit they are wrong. The mafia boss may have spent years believing that saying sorry would make him look weak, but in reality, the ability to apologize is a sign of strength. It takes courage to face the damage we have caused. It takes maturity to admit that we hurt someone, and it takes true character to change before it is too late. The story also teaches that redemption is possible, but it always requires sacrifice. A person cannot simply say they have changed. They must prove it through action. Redemption means accepting responsibility, protecting the innocent, telling the truth, and sometimes losing everything that was built on lies. For a mafia boss, redemption may mean walking away from power, exposing corruption, saving someone he once endangered, or choosing love over control. The path to redemption is painful because it forces a person to confront the worst parts of themselves, but it is also the only path that can lead to peace. From a human perspective, this story is powerful because it shows that even the hardest heart can still feel pain. Behind the cold eyes of a mafia boss, there may be regret, loneliness, childhood wounds, or a deep fear of being betrayed. This does not excuse his actions, but it helps us understand that broken people often break others when they never learn how to heal. The educational value here is important. Pain should not become an excuse to hurt people. Instead, pain should become a reason to grow, to seek wisdom, and to choose a better path. For viewers, the lesson is not to admire the criminal lifestyle, but to understand its emptiness. The suits, cars, mansions, and power may look attractive from the outside, but behind them there is often fear, guilt, and loss. A life built on violence can never bring true happiness. A life built on lies can never bring true freedom. And a life built on fear can never create real love. In the end, the story of a mafia boss is really a warning. It warns us that every choice has a consequence. It warns us that money cannot buy peace. It warns us that fear cannot replace respect. It warns us that revenge cannot heal a wounded heart. Most importantly, it reminds us that the greatest power a person can have is not the power to control others, but the power to control themselves. The deepest lesson is simple but meaningful. Choose character over pride, love over control, truth over silence, and forgiveness over revenge. No matter how dark a person's past may be, change is possible when they are willing to face the truth. But the longer someone waits, the higher the price becomes. A mafia boss may win the streets, defeat his enemies, and build an empire, but if he loses his soul, he has lost everything. True strength is not found in violence. True strength is found in responsibility, compassion, humility, and the courage to become better before it is too late.